It's now been over a decade since Sony first introduced the world to the bald, angry protagonist of the God of War franchise, and in that time, Kratos has become one of their most easily recognizable mascots, to the point where he's almost synonymous with the PlayStation brand. Sure, in recent years, with the emergence of games such as Uncharted and The Last of Us, and thanks to the meteoric rise in fame for Naughty Dog, God of War has become a lot less important for Sony and PlayStation than it once was. But the sheer awesomeness of the series simply cannot be overstated. And now, after a 5-year hiatus, Kratos is about to make his comeback. Though the upcoming PS4 debut of God of War looks a lot different than the series' origin in so many ways, fans of the franchise are still incredibly excited that they're going to be playing as Kratos again. There's not much time left before its release, so as we gear up for the next chapter in the story of the Ghost of Sparta, perhaps it's time to look back at what's already come before. In this series, we're going to take a look at the story of the entire God of War franchise, all 6 games, from start to finish, just in time for the next installment. In part 1 of our story recap of the entire series, we're going to talk about the early years in the life of Kratos, his meteoric rise in the ranks of the Spartan army, and his subsequent association with Ares, before moving on to the events portrayed in the first game in the chronology, God of War Ascension. So, unchain your blades of chaos and summon all of your rage and fury, because we're going to jump right into it. The narrative of the God of War franchise is one of epic proportions and ridiculous scope. Sure, it tells personal tales of loss and vengeance, but it also covers so much more, telling stories that span a cosmic scale, stories that portray massive battles between gods and titans and beyond. It makes sense then that our story begins with a battle for the ages. It begins with primordials. The primordials were, in many ways, the precursor of the gods of Olympus and even the Titans, the very first race of beings that ever existed. Their tale is something we must briefly look at so we can understand the origins of the beings known as the Furies. The primordials existed on a plane of existence that would be beyond the imagination of mere mortals, being astronomical in size and cosmic in nature. As such, given how unbelievably all-powerful they were, the primordials were always locked in terrifying and furious battles against each other. The constant infighting among them led to the creation of the universe, the earth, and life as we know it, and from the vortex of chaos that their wars created were born the Furies, a completely new and independent race unlike any other, neither mortal, nor god, nor titan. The Furies were terrifying beings, 3 sisters who were eventually made the guardians of honor by the gods, tasked with dealing punishment and exacting vengeance on anyone who broke oaths or betrayed the gods they were in service to. Namely, they were Megara, Tisiphone, and Alecto, the latter being the queen of the Furies. The Furies apparently took their jobs very seriously. For instance, the very first being they ever punished was subject to a gruesome fate. Aegean, the Hecatoncres, broke a blood oath to Zeus, the king of Olympus himself, and believing that death would be too much of an easy escape for him, the Furies transformed the gigantic beast's massive body into a humongous structure of stone, one that would forever serve as a prison for the damned, as well as a terrifying example for any soul who would dare to follow in his footsteps in the future. The Furies, however, soon started working very closely with one particular god more than any others, Ares, the god of war. Under his guidance, they mutated into something that went far beyond the role they originally played in the service to the gods of Olympus. Ares, you see, he had plans of his own. He planned to attack his fellow Olympians, kill his father Zeus, and as a result, overthrow him and become the ruler of Olympus himself. For this purpose, he enlisted the services of the 3 sisters known as the Furies. To aid Ares in his eventual attack on the gods, Ares mated with Alecto, the Fury Queen, in order to create the perfect soldier. The 2 of them gave birth to Orcos, but Ares was disappointed with the results. Orcos wasn't deemed to be the perfect warrior that Ares was looking for, and so he was cast aside. The Furies, however, still found a use for him, and made him their oath keeper, one who would forever be in service of the Furies and help them in carrying out their roles as the protectors of honor and oaths. Now you might be wondering, where's Kratos, the man himself, in all of this? Well, we're getting there. What we've dealt with up to this point has been some pretty vital backstory, stuff that's going to be important in part 1 of our story recap. And now is when we'll move forward and start following the story of Kratos himself. Though we will mostly be talking about 2013's God of War Ascension in part 1 of our story recap of the franchise, we will also be spending some time on sections of other games in the series in order to maintain chronology. As such, to follow Kratos' complete story, we're going to first take a look at events that are portrayed in the PSP game Ghost of Sparta. It all begins with two children, a pair of brothers in the kingdom of Sparta, namely Deimos and his younger brother Kratos. Kratos' story begins as Ares and his sister, the goddess Athena, come riding into Sparta. Their objective? To capture and take away someone who's described as a marked warrior. Why? Well, because for years, Zeus has been living in fear of a prediction, one that foretells his death at the hands of one of his sons, a marked warrior. We'll be going into greater detail about the specific prediction when we talk about God of War 2 in future parts, but for now, here's what you need to know. Just as Zeus defeated and ousted his father, the Titan Kratos, the previous ruler of Greece, to become the new king of the gods and Olympus, so too is Zeus destined to be killed by one of his own sons. Zeus suspects that the son of his, this marked warrior, will be found in Sparta, and so to quash this threat and stop the prediction from coming true, Zeus sends his children, Ares and Athena, to Sparta. When the two of them reach Sparta, they discover the young Deimos, who bears a very distinct and easily recognizable birthmark all across his face and his body. Believing him to be the marked warrior spoken of in the prediction that Zeus has been living in fear of for so long, Ares captures Deimos. Kratos tries to protect his older brother, trying to put up a fight against the god of war, but as you can imagine, the child is no match for an actual Olympian at the peak of his powers. Ares strikes down Kratos, giving him a massive scar across his right eye, and is almost about to kill him before Athena tells him to stop. With Deimos in their custody, they think they have who they came to Sparta for, and Athena tells Ares that no one else needs to die. He sees the reason in her words, and the two of them leave, taking Deimos to Thanatos, the god of death. Kratos, as you might imagine, is deeply affected by these events. A fiery rage burns within him, fueled by how helpless and pathetically weak he had felt in his attempts to stop his brother from being taken. He vows to himself that he will get stronger, that he will never let anything like this happen to him ever again. In honor of his brother's memory, he paints a red tattoo across his face and his body, a replica of the birthmark that Deimos himself bore. In doing so, Kratos unknowingly becomes the marked warrior of the prediction. But this is something we will talk about later on in the series, but for now, just store this information away. As the years go by, Kratos develops into a fierce and cunning warrior. He quickly rises through the ranks of the Spartan army, attaining the rank of captain. He wins all battles he fights with terrifying ease, and his name spreads throughout Sparta as one of the most powerful and ruthless warriors in their army. The only thing that really keeps Kratos human anymore is his wife, Lysandra, and their daughter, Calliope. But only barely so. His wife tells him to stop his bloodthirsty ascension through the ranks of Sparta, but Kratos doesn't listen. The taste of constant victories proves to be much too seductive for him. The law of averages, however, soon catches up with him, when he finally runs into a foe who cannot be bested. Kratos' Spartan army clashes against a large and veritable force of barbarians, one that numbers in the thousands and is led by the barbarian king Alric. The barbarians quickly prove that they're unlike anyone else Kratos and his warriors have ever come up against. The Spartans suffer heavy losses, and soon enough Kratos finds himself pinned down with the barbarian king standing over him and getting ready to strike down the Spartan with a final killing blow. It is at this point, in a moment of utter weakness and desperation, faced with his own imminent death, that Kratos makes a decision that goes on to change everything, and not necessarily for the better. He calls out to Ares and pledges to the god of war that if he destroys the barbarians, Kratos will forever be in service to him. Such is his thirst for victory and power that he doesn't even think twice before deciding to sell his soul. Ares, for reasons of his own, is all too willing to accept. As you might remember, Ares has been looking for a champion, a skilled warrior to help him bring out his plans of overthrowing Zeus and becoming the ruler of Olympus, and he feels that in Kratos, he might potentially have the warrior he's been looking for. Ares descends onto the battlefield and, accepting Kratos' offer of servitude, burns all of his enemies to a crisp, and thus Kratos' fate is sealed. Ares gives Kratos his new weapons, the Blades of Chaos, and sears their chains into his arms, symbolizing his oath of lifelong servitude. Under Ares' guidance, Kratos turns into nothing short of a monster. In the name of the god of war and his allegiance to him, the Spartan commits countless atrocities, razing numerous villages, killing countless innocents, and all around completely losing touch with his humanity. Everything changes when Ares sends Kratos for what is seemingly a regular raid. The god commands Kratos to lead his armies to raid a village of Athena's followers, as part of Ares' efforts to seize power and extend his dominance over the Olympians. Kratos' soldiers put the village to the torch, and he proceeds to the temple at the heart of the village with every intention of slaughtering everyone inside, before completely burning down the temple as well. Before he gets to it, he encounters the village's oracle. She tells him to stop what he's doing, to turn around, to not go into the temple, because as per her, dark and sinister things are awaiting him inside. Kratos, predictably enough, chooses to ignore this warning and pushes the oracle aside. He enters the temple. Inside, he goes into a murderous rampage, blindly slaughtering anyone and everyone who comes into his vision. Once he's done and the adrenaline and the fever of battle wears off, Kratos lays his eye on something unimaginably horrific, something he couldn't have imagined in 100 years. Before him lies the lifeless bodies of his wife and his daughter, murdered by his own blade. In his murderous and bloodthirsty fit of rage, Kratos did not even realize that he had taken the lives of the only two people in the entire world he actually cared about. We know what you're thinking at this point. Why were Kratos' wife and daughter even at that temple? How did they even get there? Well, it turns out they were brought there for a very specific reason. As Kratos laments the loss of his loved ones, horrified by his own actions, Ares appears before him and explains to him that it was him who had, in secret, brought his wife and daughter to the temple. He tricked Kratos into killing them, an act he thought would accomplish what he really wanted, sever all of his ties with humanity and turn him into the perfect warrior he needed to become. Kratos leaves the body of his wife and his daughter behind to be burnt along with the temple that they're in. As he walks outside, he encounters the village's oracle once again. She curses him, binding the ash of his family to his skin, forcing him to forever wear them as a reminder of his terrible failure. The ash sticks to Kratos' body, turning him into a chalk-like, deathly white figure, looking more like a phantom than anything else. This earns him the title of the Ghost of Sparta, a name he heavily carries with him wherever he goes. Following this, Kratos understandably renounces his allegiances to Ares, breaking the oath that bound mortal to God. This, as you might have guessed, attracts the attention of the Furies. Ares orders the Furies to capture Kratos for breaking his oath and for betraying the god of war. The Furies, as punishment for his acts, cast Kratos' mind into an endless series of illusions and hallucinations. These illusions, understandably enough, have quite a severe impact on Kratos' already taxed mind, sending him to the edges of insanity. It is in the village of Kira, where Kratos continues to be besieged by these torturous visions and illusions, that he is approached by Orcos. Remember him? Orcos is the Oath Keeper of the Furies and the son of Ares and Alecto, the Fury Queen. Orcos, however, sees the unjust nature of the oath that binds Kratos to Ares. When he finds out that Ares had tricked Kratos into killing his own wife and daughter, the Oath Keeper decides to help the Spartan. He aligns himself with Kratos and tells him about the Furies and how the visions that haunt him have been sent to him by the three sisters. Orcos reveals to him that the key to breaking free from his oath to the god of war lies with the Oracle of Delphi, Aletheia. After passing through several trials and challenges, Kratos finally finds Aletheia, and when he does, he makes a lot of revelations. For starters, the Oracle reveals to him why exactly it was that Ares chose to help Kratos against the barbarians. Because he was in need of a perfect warrior in his plans for overthrowing the Olympians, and he believed that Kratos was the soldier he'd been looking for. More importantly, the Oracle tells Kratos that the only way he can ever be free of his bond to Ares is if he manages to kill the Furies. Now, there's a lot that happens after that, most of which comprise of Kratos' quest during God of War Ascension to find the means with which he can successfully kill the Furies. Rather than wasting time talking about the details of that ultimately don't matter all that much to the larger story, let's instead talk about the actual major events of the game, the ones that have an actual bearing on Kratos' narrative throughout the franchise. Kratos and Orcos are both eventually captured by the Furies, and they're both taken to the prison the sisters have built within Aegean, the Hecatonkres. Here, Kratos is held captive and in chains, and is constantly tortured by the Furies, both physically and mentally. During one particular torture session, as the Fury Megara attacks Kratos, the Spartan manages to find an opening, and he breaks free from the chains that bind him. They then engage in a battle, during which the Fury even uses the parasitic blood within her to partially bring the Hecatonkres back to life. Kratos somehow manages to keep both Aegean and Megara at bay, and after a brutal and epic battle, he ends up killing Megara. His trials are far from over though. Soon he crosses paths with the two remaining Furies. The two sisters try to cast another illusion on Kratos' mind, making him see visions of his daughter and his wife as if they're still living and breathing. They try to seduce him with the power of these illusions, telling him that if he were to decide to return to the services of Ares, he can forever live within this world of illusions created by the Furies. Though the pull of the illusion on Kratos' already fragile mind is very strong, the Ghost of Sparta somehow manages to resist it. He refuses the illusion, forcing himself back into reality, and a battle ensues between him and the two Furies. It could only end one way, and that is exactly what happens. Kratos ends up killing both the Furies in truly brutal ways, snapping Tysophone's neck and stabbing the Fury Queen Alecto to death. Victorious, Kratos returns to his home in Sparta, where Orcos awaits. The Oathkeeper has some bad news for the Spartan. Even though he was successful in slaying the Furies, his bond with Ares still remains. Orcos reveals to Kratos that, before dying, the Furies transferred his oath to Orcos, who is, after all, their oath keeper. The bond between Kratos and Ares then is still intact, and the only way to completely and irreversibly destroy it, Orcos informs Kratos, is if he kills him. Kratos is reluctant to do so at first, but Orcos makes it clear that if Kratos wants to be rid of his oath to the god of war, killing the Oathkeeper is his only option. Orcos hands the Spartan his blade and asks him for an honorable death. Reluctantly, Kratos complies, stabbing Orcos and killing him. He takes the Oathkeeper's body into his old house, burns it down, and walks away. But while he is now free of his bond to Ares, Kratos realizes that things are in no way going to get easier. The Ghost of Sparta suddenly realizes that he is being plagued by nightmares and visions of his dead wife and daughter, of the moments when it all happened, the moment when he killed them with his own hands, with his own blades. In his nightmares, it happens over and over again, and Kratos is now having to relive that moment countless times. It turns out that his bond with Ares, what was, until now, been masking these visions, and with that bond gone, there is nothing stopping these nightmares from constantly plaguing his mind. What the tortured Ghost of Sparta now craves more than anything else is forgiveness. Forgiveness from the gods of Olympus for the heinous crimes he has committed, and for him to be rid of the constant nightmares. He realizes that the only way to do this is by serving the gods of Olympus, who promise him that if he serves them loyally, they will, at some point in the future, forgive him for his sins. Freed from his bond to Ares and wanting nothing more to be forgiven for his actions, Kratos willingly enters the service of the gods of Olympus. And that is where we will end part 1 of our series. When we come back for part 2, we will take a look at the events that take place in Chains of Olympus, as well as Kratos' final showdown against Ares, the god of war himself. And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at Gaming Bolt, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.